Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Lucy and I share videos on the topic of long COVID, chronic fatigue syndrome and mind-body approaches that can be helpful with those conditions. So today I wanted to talk about being stuck in survival mode and different signs that you're stuck in survival mode. So I'm not a medical professional. This isn't medical or mental health advice. I'm just sharing things that have helped me with my recovery and things that I've read about mind-body approaches. So I was talking to a friend recently about being in survival mode and how it can be difficult when you're used to being in survival mode and that's your normal way of operating, to recognize that you're in survival mode and also to stop that pattern. So even when symptoms have reduced or gone, this can be a challenge because getting back into survival mode is pretty easy when that's the normal way you operate in the world. And so the first thing is actually identifying if you're in a survival mode. And so I wanted to go through a list of different things that might indicate that you're in a survival mode. And when I say survival mode, I suppose I'm just meaning a fight or flight state, or a state where your sympathetic nervous system is activated. So you're not in a relaxed state and there's a general undercurrent of not feeling okay or safe in your situation, or feeling as though you need to shut down because you can't cope with what's going on. And some people would argue that symptoms can come up as part of being in a survival mode. And so I suppose this could be helpful for a lot of people with chronic health conditions or chronic symptoms to reflect on. And then also I suppose some people are in a survival mode as a result of their health condition because it's such a difficult situation to be in. And for people who maybe before they were unwell were in a survival mode, or who grew up in an environment that meant their normal way of operating in the world is in a survival mode, it can be hard to have a point of reference as to what it might look like not to be in a survival mode and how it might feel to live in a different way where you do feel more relaxed and at ease and as though everything is okay and that you're safe and that your environment is a protective and safe environment. So I'll go through this list and you can recognize if any of these things apply to you. So the signs of being in survival mode. One of them is living with a sense of urgency. So doing a lot, feeling as though you can't be present and you can't slow down. And so it can be really hard to live this way where you just can't stop doing things, and you might be really productive and you might be really good at achieving things, but if you feel as though you can get really focused on an activity and kind of lose yourself in it, of course that can be a sign that you're enjoying yourself and that it's something that you feel good about or you're in flow with. But it could also be a sign that you can't slow down because there are things that you're avoiding, you're not facing emotions, or your nervous system is dysregulated and that busyness is something that you are used to and seems to feel like it helps in the situation or is something you're inclined to do in the situation. The next sign is feeling overly responsible. So sometimes people can feel stressed because they feel very responsible for a lot of different things going on in their life. They feel responsible for other people. They feel responsible for other people's feelings. All of their situations in life is like a burden they're carrying. And every activity they do and every relationship that they're in, it feels to them as though their responsibility is much greater than the responsibility of others in those situations. And this in itself, you can see why living like this would cause stress. So it can be a vicious cycle where this is what you do because you're in survival mode, and doing this also keeps you in survival mode because you always have this additional stress and pressure of feeling overly responsible for everything in your life. Another sign is being more aware that your nervous system is dysregulated. So for people who are not well, they might not be as aware that their nervous system is dysregulated, but I think especially within the community of people with chronic fatigue syndrome and long COVID, there's a lot that's written about the nervous system and regulation and dysregulation. And so a lot of people are already aware that their nervous system is dysregulated. And when your nervous system is dysregulated, it can impact how you feel physically. So it could lead to symptoms like digestive issues, like brain fog, like many other symptoms. Fatigue, some people argue, is a shutdown response related to a dysregulated nervous system. And again, a type of survival mode of shutting down, and in some cases impacting you on a really physical level. Another sign is feeling as though you're barely coping. So if you feel as though you're just about getting through the day and you're not really coping with things, there's a chance that there might be some things you're avoiding, but also that you feel as though your capacity to cope is much lower than the stress that you are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So for some people, they might feel stressed, but they feel like they can cope with that stress. If you feel as though there's stress or there's difficulty in your life that you just don't have the skills and the capacity to deal with, it's going to feel really challenging and like there's a big burden and a big challenge on your hands. And for many people, they do feel as though they're just about getting through the day and they're just about managing to do some of the basic things that they think might help. But this is also somewhat connected to self-efficacy, which is something I've talked about before, your belief in your ability to cope with a situation or to change a situation and to get an outcome that you want. And also your perceived control in a situation. So the belief that you have around how much control you have over that situation. And if you believe that everything in your situation is out of your control, it's very disempowering, and it can add to that thought that you might be having about not being able to cope and that feeling of being overwhelmed and not able to manage. Another sign which is kind of similar to this is focusing on things that you can't control. So putting your attention on things that you can't control, and also trying different things that you know haven't worked before but that you are drawn to trying again. So for instance, if you are a very stressed person and you decide to take on a very stressful role at work and that you know is going to really be challenging on a number of levels, you are choosing to do something that doesn't really align with what you want or what you're not coping with. And so in some instances, people find themselves in a similar situation again and again in their life, and it's not that they're choosing that because they're really aware of what's going on. It's that they're choosing those situations that are really difficult and really challenging and really stressful because there's something there, they have some idea, or a part of them has some idea that this is what they need to do, or this is going to help, when actually it's really just making the situation worse for them. Another sign is feeling like you can't cope and you just want to shut the world out. You want to crawl under a rock and want everything to just not be in your attention. So it might also be by distracting yourself, by watching TV all day and just trying to block out any thoughts about other things that are going on, maybe other things that you need to do, other things that maybe you need to deal with and you do have the capacity to deal with, but you don't feel like you can face it. So for some people that might be opening letters. For other people it might be paying their bills or checking their finances because they just can't face checking it. And I suppose it's a way to avoid facing some realities and trying to distract yourself or stay away or kind of hide from issues that might be present. Another one is self-neglect. So if you are not really caring for yourself in the way that you should, if you're not eating well and you know you're not eating well, if you're not giving yourself attention in the way that you should, if you have kind of emotions or issues or difficult thoughts or things that are going on in the background that you just don't want to face and address, this could also be termed self-neglect. Another thing that could be related to self-neglect is gaslighting yourself. So telling yourself that some issue isn't really an issue, some issue that you have isn't important, or some feelings that you have are not feelings that you should feel, or that you should be grateful when a part of you really feels, sad and disappointed and angry and frustrated. You're telling yourself you should feel a different way. And so a lot of these actually link back to paying attention to emotions, becoming aware of emotions, becoming aware of how you feel, and journaling about that, writing about it, talking about it, doing something to help get it out of your system where you might be repressing it, doing anything that might help for you to feel that emotion, to be with that emotion, and not to stuff it down or to push it to one side. Another one is not asking for help, or not even being aware that you're not asking for help. So some people are so used to dealing with things on their own that they don't ask for help, and they don't even see it as an option. So this could be linked to the fact that you don't feel safe to ask others for help, that you see yourself as being the only person you can rely on, or that you are overly responsible for things, so therefore you don't delegate to other people in your life. There are multiple different things this could be connected to, but ultimately you're not using resources that are available to you. And I know that not everyone has someone who they can ask to help them. What I'm talking about here is more of an example that you don't even think about asking for help, or there is help available but you're not asking. Another sign of being in survival mode is always feeling anxious or on edge or depressed, or that kind of wired and tired feeling. So the wired and tired feeling, people with chronic fatigue syndrome, a lot of people will know what I'm talking about when I say that, but it's basically a state where you feel too wired to rest, but you also feel exhausted and tired and drained, and perhaps your symptoms are worse at this time as well. It's as though your nervous system is revved up, but you also need to rest, and it's like you're kind of caught in between two states. Then also feeling anxious all the time. I think some people live with an underlying anxiety on a day-to-day basis, and it's just their normal way of operating, and they've been like that their whole life, and they don't really know what it's like not to feel anxious. And so if this is you, it could be really helpful to reflect on this and think about where it might have come from and how it might be for you to feel more relaxed on a day-to-day basis, and if that's something you could work on. And I'll go through different things that can be helpful for being stuck in survival mode. But I think being in a state of depression or shutdown on an ongoing basis, or being anxious on an ongoing basis, or on edge on an ongoing basis, are signs that you're not in a connected, safe state within your nervous system, which is known as the ventral vagal nervous system state. So another sign is being very reactive to news. So knowing that your reaction is maybe a little bit more extreme than other people's in that situation, or than how you used to react to something happening. So if something happens that is not ideal, you know, for instance, you accidentally send someone the wrong message, that your reaction feels so extreme to that thing and it feels very uncontrollable. This can be a sign that you're in a survival mode because your reactions are very exaggerated or very difficult in those situations. And in some cases, this can be because of the state of your nervous system at the moment. For other people, it could be sort of a buildup of stress and anxiety, which makes it feel much more difficult to deal with things that are going wrong. Another sign of being in a survival mode is that fear of things going wrong, a fear that something awful is going to happen any minute. You're going to get bad news, that it's like this anticipation or this vigilance that something bad will happen, something will go wrong, and it's just a matter of time. And it's understandable why you would feel anxious if you were thinking like that, because that's quite an anxiety-provoking thought, especially when that thought might be accompanied by the idea that I won't be able to cope with what goes wrong. Because the feeling of not being able to cope or manage in these situations is really going to impact our confidence and our feeling of being okay and being safe in life and in our environment or in our situation. Another sign that you could be in survival mode could be behaviours like drinking too much, eating too much unhealthy food, comfort eating, or drug use or smoking, doing things that you'd prefer not to do, but that you feel as though they're sort of a coping mechanism, something that you can do to feel a bit better. I think also technology can come into this one as well, where using too much technology or hours on end distraction can also be linked to what I said before, sort of an avoidance state and a state where we feel we can't cope with the reality of our situation. So from that list, you can see there's a lot of different ways being in a survival mode can show up. And for different people, the severity will differ as well. And it might also vary day to day, or within one day, the extent of which you're in survival mode might change as well. And you might also have different signs of being in survival mode at different times of your life, or even just different times of a week. So it's quite varied, but essentially you won't feel good if you're in survival mode. You will either feel stressed or shut down, or as though you're not really coping, or that there's something going on that you're not able to manage. And when you are in a more relaxed, calm state, you would notice being able to slow down, to feel as though you're able to cope, to feel as though everything is okay. And I suppose basically the opposite of a lot of the things that I've said. So in the next video, I'm going to go through a few different ways of managing being in survival mode, things that you can do or try that might help. But there isn't a quick fix. This can take time, especially if you've been in a survival mode since you were a child, or as a result of your family dynamic when you were growing up, or as a result of a circumstance that's been going on for a long time. It can take time to change. One of the really most important things is being aware that you're actually in a survival mode in the first place, because I think for some people who have been in a survival mode for a really long time, or this is what they're used to, they don't really realize that there is a different way of being, and that this is something they need to work on. And if you're not aware, then you're not going to do anything to change, or you're not going to see a reason to change or to work on this. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe. There's a link to the Facebook group in the description if you're interested in joining. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.